Jake Morrison had 3 rules for surviving as the only human mechanic on Nexus Station. First, always charge aliens double, because they never question Earth pricing. Second, never ask what the device you're fixing actually does, because ignorance is bliss and plausible deniability. Third, if something starts glowing or making ominous humming sounds, run first and send the bill later. Right now, staring at the Zentorian pulse regulator that was doing both glowing and humming, Jake was seriously considering rule number 3. "Come on, you oversized chrome suppository," he muttered, giving the device a strategic whack with his favorite wrench. The glowing stopped. The humming continued, but at least now it sounded more like a dying cat than an imminent explosion. Progress. Nexus Station was what happened when you took every species in the galaxy, threw them into a giant metal can, and told them to get along. The result was beautiful chaos, assuming your definition of beautiful included the smell of sulfur from the Creech traders, the constant arguments between the overly polite Valdorians and the aggressively rude Graxians, and the mysterious stains that appeared on the walls whenever the blob people held their cultural festivals. Jake had been fixing their broken junk for 3 years now, and he'd developed a healthy appreciation for human engineering. Sure, their stuff wasn't as advanced as the gravitic flux capacitors or quantum coffee makers the aliens brought him, but human tech had one crucial advantage. When it broke, you could actually fix it, without needing a PhD in theoretical impossibility. He was just about to declare victory over the pulse regulator when he heard it. A sound that cut through the usual station cacophony like a knife through butter. Except instead of butter, it was his concentration. And instead of a knife, it was the most heartbreaking crying he'd ever heard. Jake paused, wrench halfway to the next component. In his 3 years on Nexus Station, he'd heard every possible noise the various species could make. Graxian war chants, Valdorian poetry recitations, that weird clicking thing the insectoids did when they were happy. But this was different. This was the universal sound of a kid who'd lost something important. "Not my problem," he told himself firmly. "I fix machines, not feelings." The crying continued, now accompanied by what sounded like hiccups. Hiccups that might have been accompanied by small puffs of smoke. Jake set down his wrench with a sigh. Damn it. He followed the sound through the maze of corridors that made up Sector 7, past the perpetually closed restaurant that claimed to serve authentic human cuisine. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Past the shop that sold lucky crystals that were definitely just colored glass, and around the corner to the station's small recreational area. There, sitting in the middle of what the station optimistically called a park, 3 benches and a sad-looking plant that might have been plastic, was a small dragon. Now, Jake had seen dragons before. Hard to miss them, really. They were typically 8 feet tall, covered in scales that could deflect plasma fire, and had a tendency to solve problems by incinerating them. This dragon was different. This dragon was maybe 3 feet tall, had scales that looked more like they belonged on a particularly fancy fish, and was clutching something in its tiny claws while producing tears that were actually steaming as they hit the floor. "Well," Jake said to himself, "that's new." The little dragon looked up at him with eyes the size of dinner plates, sniffled once, and said something in what Jake assumed was dragon language. It sounded like someone gargling gravel, but somehow sad gravel. "Sorry, kid, I don't speak dragon," Jake said, crouching down to get a better look. "You okay?" The dragon tilted its head, then held up whatever it was clutching. Jake blinked. It looked like someone had taken a piece of Earth technology, maybe an old tablet computer, and then let a particularly creative alien have a go at improving it. The result was a metallic rectangle covered in crystalline formations and what appeared to be tiny dancing lights, except half the lights were dead and one corner was smoking ominously. "Oh," Jake said, understanding dawning. "Your toy's broken." The dragon nodded vigorously, then said something that definitely included the words sparkly and possibly worry, though Jake's knowledge of dragon-ascented common galactic was admittedly limited. Jake looked around the recreational area. Empty, as usual. Most station inhabitants gave dragons a wide berth, even adorable baby ones. Something about respect for apex predators and not wanting to get accidentally incinerated. Their loss. "Let me guess," Jake said, settling into a more comfortable position. "Nobody else wants to help fix your sparkly worry thing?" The dragon shook its head sadly and held the device closer to its chest. Jake could see now that it wasn't just broken, it was sophisticated broken. The kind of broken that suggested this wasn't just some random toy, but something important. Something that had been built with the kind of care and attention to detail that you usually only saw in really expensive military hardware or really expensive children's toys. For really expensive children. "All right, kid," Jake said, extending his hand. "Let Uncle Jake take a look." The little dragon hesitated for exactly half a second before carefully placing the broken device in Jake's hands. Up close, it was even more impressive and confusing. The base looked like it had been carved from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light, while the crystalline additions pulsed with a faint inner glow, or at least they were supposed to pulse. Right now, most of them looked like a string of Christmas lights after your cat had gotten to them. "My name is Ember," the dragon said in heavily accented Common Galactic, pronouncing each word carefully like she'd been practicing. "This is my memory keeper. It tells stories of the old times, but now it only makes sad beeping." Jake nearly dropped the device. "You can talk?" Ember nodded proudly. "Father says I am very smart for only being 47 years old." 47? Jake tried to wrap his head around dragon aging. "That's like, what, 7 in human years?" "I do not know human years," Amber said seriously, "but I know my memory keeper is very broken, and everyone else said it cannot be fixed. They said the quantum matrix is too scrambled." She pronounced quantum matrix like she was reciting something she'd heard adults say. Jake turned the device over in his hands, looking for some kind of access panel. "Everyone else being?" "The smart people with the long coats who smell like electricity. They looked at it for 3 entire minutes and said it was beyond repair." Ember's voice took on the particular tone of indignation that only children could achieve. 3 minutes? It took Father longer than that to decide what to have for breakfast yesterday. "Engineers," Jake muttered. "Probably Zentorians. They're great at building things, terrible at fixing them. If it can't be solved with a new theoretical framework and 6 months of committee meetings, they declare it impossible." As if summoned by Jake's criticism of proper procedure, his communicator crackled to life. "Attention all station personnel. This is Commander Voss with a priority security alert. We have a missing individual in Sector 7. Repeat, missing individual, Sector 7. Subject is approximately 3 feet tall, scaled, and answers to the name Princess Ember of the Draconic Royal House. If located, do not approach. Contact security immediately." Jake looked at Ember. Ember looked at Jake. "Princess," Jake asked. Ember had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have forgotten to tell my guards where I was going when I left to find someone to fix my memory keeper." "Your guards. They are very nice, but they do not understand about broken toys. They would have said it was too dangerous to bring it to the repair sectors." Ember's expression suggested this was not the first time her guards' protective instincts had conflicted with her curiosity. Jake's communicator crackled again. "Additional information. Subject may be in distress. Last seen in the vicinity of the recreational area. All maintenance and service personnel are advised to report any unusual sounds or disturbances." "Distress," Jake repeated, looking at the small dragon who was now examining his toolbox with obvious fascination. "I was crying very loudly," Ember admitted, "but only because I was sad about my memory keeper. I am not in distress now because you are going to fix it." The confidence in her voice was both flattering and terrifying. Jake had built his reputation on fixing things that other people declared unfixable, but this looked like it was operating on principles that would make a theoretical physicist weep. The quantum matrix Ember had mentioned wasn't just scrambled. It looked like someone had put it through a blender and then tried to reassemble it while blindfolded. "Kid," Jake said carefully, "I'm not sure this is fixable. I mean, I'll try, but this technology is way beyond anything I've seen before." Ember's expression fell slightly, but then she straightened with the kind of determination that suggested royal bloodlines came with extra stubbornness. "But you have not said it is impossible. Everyone else said impossible first thing." "I don't believe in impossible," Jake said, which was true. "I believe in I haven't figured out how yet and this is going to cost extra, but never impossible." "Then you will try?" Jake looked at the device again. It was clearly important to her. And honestly, the challenge was starting to appeal to his professional pride. How hard could it be? It was just another piece of alien technology that needed percussive maintenance and creative problem-solving. "Yeah," he said, surprising himself. "Yeah. I'll try. But we should probably get you back to your guards before Commander Voss calls in the cavalry." "What is cavalry?" "Heavily armed people who ask questions later." Ember considered this seriously. "That sounds like my Uncle Smog. He is not very patient with explanations." Jake's communicator crackled a third time. This time, Commander Voss's voice had acquired the particular edge that suggested someone was about to have a very bad day. All personnel be advised, Draconic Imperial Security has been notified of the situation. Estimated arrival time for additional search personnel is 15 minutes. Repeat, Imperial Security inbound. Imperial Security, Jake said faintly. They are very thorough, Ember said helpfully, but also very loud, and they have very large weapons. Father says it is because they take their job protecting me very seriously. Jake looked at the broken device, then at the princess, then at his nice, quiet workshop where nobody ever threatened him with large weapons, operated by overprotective dragon guards. Right, he said, making a decision that he would later categorize as either brilliant or suicidally stupid. Change of plans, princess. How do you feel about a field trip to my workshop? Jake's workshop was what happened when a human engineer was given unlimited access to alien technology and absolutely no adult supervision. Every surface was covered with devices in various states of disrepair, spare parts that might have come from 17 different star systems, and tools that ranged from standard human wrenches to things that hummed with barely contained energy and occasionally levitated when nobody was looking. This place smells like home, Ember said approvingly, inhaling deeply. Like metal and electricity, and the good kind of smoke. The good kind of smoke. The kind that means someone is building something, not the kind that means someone made a mistake. Ember hopped onto Jake's workbench with surprising grace for someone with tiny wings that were clearly decorative at this point. Uncle Smog makes the mistake kind a lot when he tries to cook. Jake cleared a space on his main workbench, carefully moving aside a Graxian plasma cutter and what appeared to be a Valdorian meditation sphere that had somehow gotten crossed with a disco ball. He placed Ember's memory keeper under his best magnifying setup and immediately understood why the Zentorian engineers had given up. Holy crap, he breathed. Is that good holy crap or bad holy crap? Ember asked, swinging her legs from her perch. It's complicated holy crap. Jake activated his diagnostic scanner, a piece of hybrid technology he'd built from 6 different alien systems and 1 old Earth multimeter. This thing isn't just broken, kid. Whoever built this was showing off. I'm seeing quantum resonance chambers, holographic projection matrices, data storage that makes our best computers look like pocket calculators, and what I think might be a miniaturized reality anchor. What is a reality anchor? Something that costs more than my entire workshop, Jake said, adjusting the scanner's sensitivity. The good news is, I think I know what happened. The bad news is, fixing it is going to require creative application of human stupidity. Ember perked up. I like creative stupidity. Father says it is one of humanity's greatest talents. Your father sounds like a smart dragon. Jake pulled out his favorite diagnostic probe, a device he'd built from Zentarian precision sensors and good old-fashioned human stubbornness. See, your fancy quantum matrix got scrambled, because whoever last maintained this tried to upgrade the containment field without recalibrating the resonance frequency. It's like trying to tune a piano while someone's hitting it with a hammer. The probe beeped ominously as it made contact with the memory keeper's surface. Jake frowned at the readings. That's weird. According to this, the core memory isn't actually damaged, it's just locked behind about 17 different quantum encryption protocols that are all fighting with each other. Can you unlock them? Jake grinned, and it was not a reassuring expression. Princess, I'm about to introduce your ancient dragon technology to a little something I like to call percussive maintenance. Sounds violent. Oh, it is. Jake selected his second favored wrench, a tool that had fixed everything from insectoid nav computers to blob people emotional resonators. But sometimes violence is exactly what technology needs. The trick is knowing where to hit it. He studied the device for a long moment, tracing the flow of energy through the crystalline structures with his probe. The quantum matrix was definitely scrambled, but there was a pattern to the chaos, like someone had shuffled a deck of cards, but done it badly, leaving tells that a careful observer could exploit. Right, he said, raising the wrench. Here goes nothing. Should I cover my eyes? Probably. Jake brought the wrench down in a precisely calculated strike right where the main crystalline formation met the metal base. There was a bright flash, a sound like a tuning fork having an argument with a synthesizer, and then blessed silence. For about half a second. Then the memory keeper lit up like a Christmas tree having a seizure. Holographic displays erupted from every surface, filling Jake's workshop with images that his brain couldn't quite process. Dragons soaring through space, massive cities carved into the sides of mountains, battles fought with weapons that turned physics into gentle suggestions. Oh, Ember breathed. Oh, it is working better than before. Define better, Jake said, trying to make sense of the cascade of holographic data. Because right now it looks like your memory keeper is having some kind of digital nervous breakdown. But even as he said it, the chaotic display began to organize itself. The random images sorted themselves into coherent streams, the overlapping holograms separated into distinct layers, and the whole system settled into a gentle, rhythmic pulse that was definitely not there before. I may have accidentally upgraded your quantum matrix, Jake admitted. The good news is, it's working. The interesting news is, I have no idea how I did it. Ember clapped her tiny claws together in delight. Father always says the best surprises are the ones that work better than you expected. Jake was about to respond when his communicator erupted in a symphony of urgent beeps, official-sounding voices, and what might have been the distant sound of heavily armed dragons asking pointed questions about the location of missing princesses. Speaking of your father, he said, I think we might want to work on our explanation for why his daughter is in an unlicensed human repair shop instead of safely surrounded by royal guards. That is easy, Imbra said, holding up her now functional memory keeper as holographic dragons danced around her head. I will tell him you are a magician. What Jake didn't know, and what would have sent him into a panic spiral that could be seen from orbit, was that Emperor Draknor had been watching the entire interaction through Nexus Station's security feeds. The Dragon Emperor had arrived at the station 6 hours earlier for what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic meeting, only to discover that his daughter had given her guards the slip and vanished into the station's maze of maintenance corridors. Rather than immediately deploying the full might of the draconic Imperial Navy to turn over every bolt and rivet on the station, Draknor had done something that surprised even himself. He had accessed the security system and started watching. What he saw had been illuminating. "My lord," General Korath said from behind him, his voice carrying the particular strain that came from trying to manage a missing princess, panicked guards, and an emperor who seemed oddly calm about the whole situation. "The search teams are ready to begin systematic sweeps of all civilian areas. We can have Princess Ember back within the hour." "Watch," Draknor said simply, gesturing to the screen where Jake was currently explaining quantum resonance theory to his daughter, using what appeared to be kitchen utensils as visual aids. "My lord, watch and learn, old friend. Our daughter has found something interesting." On screen, Jake was holding up a spoon and a fork, demonstrating how the quantum matrix layers interacted. "See, it's like this spoon is your data layer, and this fork is your encryption layer. When they're aligned properly, everything works fine, but when they get scrambled," he crossed the utensils and made a buzzing sound, "everything goes haywire." Ember nodded seriously, as if this explanation made perfect sense to a 47-year-old dragon princess. "He's explaining quantum mechanics using cutlery," Draknor observed with something that might have been amusement, "and she's understanding it. Sir, with respect, we should retrieve the princess immediately. This human could be a security risk." Draknor tilted his massive head, considering. "General, how long did our finest technicians spend attempting to repair the Crown Archives?" 3 months, my lord. The consensus was that the quantum matrix damage was irreparable without completely rebuilding the core systems. "And how long has this human been working on it?" General Korath checked his chronometer with obvious reluctance. 17 minutes, sir." On screen, Jake was now doing something that made Korath's scales stand on end. He was hitting the Crown Archives with a wrench. Not carefully, not precisely, but with the kind of casual confidence usually reserved for fixing a stubborn door hinge. "He's attacking it with primitive tools," Korath said faintly. "He's fixing it with primitive tools," Draknor corrected, watching as the device erupted in holographic displays. "Look closer, General. That's not random violence. He calculated that strike perfectly. He understood the resonance patterns better in 17 minutes than our engineers did in 3 months. The holographic displays were showing scenes from the earliest days of the Draconic Empire, historical records that had been locked away for centuries due to the quantum matrix corruption. But now they played clearly, each image crisp and properly sequenced. "That's impossible," Korath breathed. "Apparently not." Draknor leaned forward as Ember clapped her claws together in delight. "Tell me, General, what do you see when you look at this human?" Korath squinted at the screen. Jake was currently explaining his repair methodology to Ember, who was listening with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for storytelling. "I see. A maintenance worker. Primitive tools, primitive methods. Probably dangerous to allow him near advanced technology. I see someone who fixed our most sacred relic like it was a broken toy." Draknor's voice carried the kind of quiet intensity that made even veteran generals pay attention. I see someone who treated our daughter with kindness when everyone else was too afraid to approach her. I see someone who doesn't know he just accomplished the impossible, which suggests he accomplishes the impossible on a regular basis. On screen, Jake's communicator was crackling with increasingly urgent messages about Imperial security and missing princesses. Jake was looking distinctly nervous now, finally grasping that helping a lost child fix her toy might have larger implications than he'd originally calculated. "Should we continue the search theater?" Korath asked. Draknor considered this. "For a few more minutes. I want to see how he handles the pressure." He paused. "And I want to see how Ember handles it. She's been remarkably calm about being lost." As if summoned by her father's observation, Ember chose that moment to look directly at the security camera and wave. Not the casual wave of someone who'd noticed the camera by accident, but the deliberate wave of someone who'd known she was being watched all along. "It's she just," Korath began. "Oh yes," Dragnor said, a rumbling sound that might have been laughter building in his chest. "She knew. The entire time, she knew we were watching." On screen, Ember leaned over and whispered something to Jake, who immediately looked up at the camera with an expression of dawning horror. "Time to make our entrance," Draknor said, rising from his chair with fluid grace. "I believe our daughter has had quite enough fun for one day." "Should I bring the full security detail, my lord?" "Just us, General. I have a feeling this human has had quite enough excitement for one day without us adding to it." Draknor paused at the door. "Besides, anyone who can fix the Crown Archives deserves a proper introduction, don't you think?" Jake Morrison had experienced many uncomfortable moments in his 3 years on Nexus Station. There was the time he'd accidentally insulted a Graxian warchief by complimenting his weapon maintenance. There was the incident with the Blob People's Cultural Festival that he still didn't like to think about. There was even that awkward dinner where he discovered that what he thought was chicken was actually a Valdorian delicacy that was still technically alive. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the moment when Emperor Draknor walked into his workshop. The Dragon Emperor didn't fit through the door, which should have been Jake's first clue that this was about to become a very different kind of day. Instead, the entire wall simply moved. Not violently, not destructively, just politely slid aside, as if the station's hull plating had suddenly remembered it had somewhere else to be. "Hello, Father," Ember said cheerfully, as if having walls rearrange themselves was perfectly normal. "Look, I got my memory keeper fixed." Draknor stepped through the new doorway with the kind of fluid grace that made Jake's hindbrain scream warnings about apex predators and the food chain. He was massive in a way that made the workshop feel like a dollhouse, covered in scales that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. And when he looked at Jake, his eyes held the kind of ancient intelligence that suggested he'd been having complicated thoughts since before Jake's species had figured out fire. "So I see," Draknor said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the tools on Jake's workbench vibrate sympathetically. "And who, daughter, is your new friend?" Jake opened his mouth to introduce himself and managed to produce something that sounded like a dying air conditioner. "This is Jake Morrison," Ember announced proudly. "He is a magician who fixes impossible things and explains quantum mechanics with kitchen utensils." "Is he now?" Draknor's attention focused on Jake with the intensity of a star going nova. "Hello, Jake Morrison, who fixes impossible things. I am Emperor Draknor, and I believe you have something that belongs to my family." Jake's brain, which had been struggling with the logistics of dragon royalty in his workshop, finally caught up with the implications of Ember's casual revelation. "Crown Archives," he said weakly. "Crown Archives," Draknor confirmed. "The repository of our entire civilization's history, containing the memories and knowledge of 10,000 years of dragons. The device that our greatest technicians declared irreparably damaged." He paused, and Jake could swear he saw amusement in those ancient eyes. "The device that you fixed in 17 minutes using what I believe my daughter called creative stupidity." Behind the Emperor, a second dragon entered through the conveniently dragon-sized opening. This one wore what appeared to be military insignia, and had the particular bearing of someone whose job involved keeping emperors alive and princesses from wandering off. "General Korath," Draknor said without looking back. "Meet Jake Morrison, the human who accomplished what the Dragon Imperial Academy of Sciences could not." "My lord," Korath said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss the security implications." "Security implications?" Draknor tilted his massive head. "General, this human has just demonstrated technical capabilities that exceed our own, and he used them to help a lost child fix her broken toy. What exactly do you believe the security implications to be?" Jake found his voice. though it came out about an octave higher than usual. Look, I had no idea it was important. She said it was broken. I fixed it. That's what I do. I fix things. I didn't mean to quantum matrix anything, or violate any sacred relics, or... Breathe, Draknor said gently. You are not in trouble, Jake Morrison. I'm not? You are not. Draknor settled into a position that was probably the dragon equivalent of sitting, though it still left him looming over Jake's workshop like a benevolent mountain. Instead, you have presented me with a fascinating puzzle. Ember had hopped down from the workbench and was now showing her father the restored holographic displays, chattering excitedly about the historical scenes and how pretty they looked now that they weren't all staticky. You see, Draknor continued, the Crown Archives are not merely a historical repository. They are a test, a measure of technological and intuitive understanding that we use to evaluate our greatest minds. His voice carried a note of something that might have been pride. In our recorded history, exactly 3 individuals have successfully interfaced with the Archive's quantum matrix systems. My great-grandfather, who built them, the legendary technician Viroth the Wise, who maintained them for 2 centuries, and now, apparently, a human mechanic who thought he was fixing a child's toy. Jake stared at the holographic displays, which were now showing what appeared to be dragons building massive space stations using tools that bent reality like putty. That's not possible. And yet, here we are. Drakenor gestured with one claw at the perfectly functioning device. Which brings me to my puzzle, Jake Morrison. Either you are the most intuitive technological genius our galaxy has seen in millennia, or humans have some fundamental understanding of quantum systems that we have overlooked. He paused. Or both. Or, Jake said, inspiration striking with the force of a meteor, your technology isn't actually as complicated as you think it is. The silence that followed this statement was the kind of silence that usually preceded either enlightenment or executions. Explain, Draknor said quietly. Jake took a deep breath, realized he was about to either revolutionize interspecies relations or get himself incinerated, and decided to commit to the bit. Right, so you built this thing to be fancy, right? Quantum matrices, reality anchors, all this high-end stuff. But at its core, it's just a data storage and projection system. All the quantum encryption and fancy resonance chambers. That's not the device, that's the security system. And security systems, Jake grinned, feeling more confident now that he was talking about something he actually understood. Security systems are just puzzles. And humans? We're really, really good at cheating on puzzles. The silence stretched for approximately 3 seconds, which was long enough for Jake to wonder if his life insurance covered death by Dragon Emperor. Then Draknor did something that no human on Nexus Station had ever witnessed before. He laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a diplomatic expression of amusement. It was a full, rumbling belly laugh that made the walls shake and caused several small tools to fall off Jake's workbench. It was the laugh of someone who'd just been handed the punchline to a joke that had been building for 10,000 years. Cheating on puzzles, Draknor repeated, still chuckling. General Korath, did you hear that? We spent 3 months analyzing quantum resonance frequencies and recalibrating matrix harmonics, and this human calls it cheating on puzzles. Korath looked like he was having some kind of existential crisis. But the theoretical frameworks, the advanced mathematics, are all correct and completely unnecessary, Jake said, warming to his theme now that he wasn't expecting immediate incineration. Look, your ancestors built this thing to be secure, right? So they made it really, really complicated. But they also needed it to actually work, which means somewhere under all that complexity, there's got to be a simple, elegant solution. There always is. And you found this simple solution by hitting it with a wrench? Draknor observed. Well, yeah. When you strip away all the fancy quantum encryption, it's basically just a computer with trust issues. Sometimes you've got to show technology who's boss. Jake gestured at his workshop full of successfully repaired alien devices. Works on Zentorian pulse regulators, works on Graxian weapons systems, apparently works on ancient dragon archives. The principle's the same. Find the core problem, ignore the unnecessary complications, apply percussive maintenance as needed. Ember, who had been following this conversation with obvious delight, chose that moment to pipe up. Father, can we keep him? Keep him? Draknor looked amused. Like Uncle Smog keeps his science advisors, but for fixing things. Jake could be our official imperial fixer of impossible things. Jake held up his hands in what he hoped was a diplomatic gesture. That's very flattering, Princess, but I've got a business to run here. Can't exactly pack up and move to the Dragon Empire. You could bring the business, Draknor said thoughtfully. The position of Chief Imperial Engineer has been vacant for some time now. The salary would be substantial. How substantial? Enough to buy your own space station. Jake blinked. That's wow. But I'm not really management material. I like fixing things, not managing people who fix things. Too much paperwork, not enough percussive maintenance. What if, Draknor said slowly, we offered you a consulting contract instead? Whenever we encounter something truly impossible to repair, we send it to you. You fix it, we pay you handsomely, and everyone benefits from human insights into the art of cheating on puzzles. And I get to stay here, keep my workshop, continue overcharging aliens for basic repairs? All of that, plus diplomatic immunity and a very generous retainer. Draknor's expression suggested he was enjoying this negotiation far more than was probably dignified for an emperor. Think of it as being our official, unofficial advisor on the creative application of human stupidity. Jake considered this. On one hand, it was a steady income from clients who apparently had access to technology that could buy space stations. On the other hand, it meant getting involved with dragon politics, which seemed like it could be complicated. Do I have to wear a uniform? No. Do I have to attend meetings? Only the interesting ones. Do I have to stop calling it percussive maintenance? I would be disappointed if you did. Jake grinned. Deal. Amber clapped her claws together in delight. Does this mean I can visit Uncle Jake whenever my toys break? Within reason, Draknor said diplomatically, and with appropriate guards next time. The guards are boring, Amber complained. They do not know about quantum mechanics or kitchen utensils. Perhaps Uncle Jake could teach them, her father suggested. I suspect there are many applications for creative human stupidity in the Imperial Guard. 3 hours later, after the contracts had been signed, the diplomatic immunity papers had been filed, and the Imperial Guard had been given a crash course in Jake's repair philosophy, Nexus Station settled back into its normal chaos. The major difference was that Jake's workshop now sported a sign in 17 different languages, including one that consisted entirely of scorch marks, in a very specific pattern. The sign read, Wrench Morrison's Repair Shop. We fix everything, even ancient dragon relics, apparently. Now accepting Imperial consultations. Percussive maintenance applied with precision and enthusiasm. No appointment necessary, diplomatic immunity included. And in smaller text at the bottom, special rates for crying hatchlings. Jake was just settling in to work on a Valdorian meditation sphere that had somehow gotten confused about which dimension it was supposed to exist in when his door chimed. He looked up to see a small, nervous-looking insectoid holding what appeared to be a device that was simultaneously on fire and frozen solid. Excuse me, the insectoid said in heavily accented Common Galactic, but I heard you fix impossible things? Jake grinned and reached for his favorite wrench. That's what the sign says. What have you got for me? Some things, he reflected, as he prepared to apply creative human stupidity to yet another impossible problem, never changed. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way. After all, the galaxy was full of broken things, and humans were really, really good at cheating on puzzles.